All right, today we're diving into a really big question, one that I think a lot of us wrestle with. How do you find real meaning in a world that just feels, well, chaotic? And we're going to explore this using the incredible psychological tools left to us by the one and only Carl Jung. You know the feeling, right? On paper, everything's great. You've got the job, the life, you've checked all the boxes you were supposed to check. But deep down, there's this nagging sense of emptiness, a quiet voice asking, wait, is this really it? This isn't just some cliche midlife crisis. It's a genuine call from your deeper self, wondering what it's all for. And what's her first line of defense against that nagging feeling, I'm just too busy? I mean, who has the time for deep self-reflection when there are client demands, endless to-do lists, and just life happening all the time? It feels like a luxury. But Jung would argue that ignoring that inner voice is actually the most expensive mistake we can make. And that brings us right to the man himself, Carl Jung. See, he wasn't just another psychologist. He was what you might call a psychologist of meaning. He believed this search for meaning isn't just a nice to have, it's a fundamental human need. This quote says it all. At the end of the day, you can have all the success in the world, but if you don't have meaning, you have nothing. So, who was this guy, really? And how did his own incredibly turbulent life, filled with conflict, a major personal crisis, and deep, deep self-exploration, lead him to these groundbreaking ideas about the human mind? To really get Jung's work, you have to get his life story. He starts as this sensitive kid, the son of a pastor, always more interested in his inner world of dreams than the outside one. He grows up to be this brilliant, charismatic psychiatrist, and he's actually handpicked by the legendary Sigmund Freud to be his successor. But there was a problem. Jung's own observations just didn't line up with Freud's, which led to this really painful, devastating break between them. And that crisis? It threw him into a period of intense self-exploration, where he basically mapped his own psyche in his famous Red Book. And that became the bedrock of all his theories. And that disagreement really gets to the heart of it. Freud was desperate to make psychology a respected hard science. He was terrified that Jung's ideas, especially this concept of a collective unconscious, a kind of shared memory bank of human symbols and archetypes, were just too mystical. You know, Jung would ask, why do people all over the world, people who've never even seen a snake, dream of them? For Jung, that pointed to something ancient and universal we all share. For Freud, it sounded way too much like voodoo, and he thought it would completely discredit their new field. Okay, so how do we start this journey of finding meaning for ourselves? Well, Jung gives us a really powerful and kind of challenging first step. We have to meet our inner shadow. Now, when you hear shadow, it sounds dark and evil, but that's not quite right. The shadow is simply all the parts of ourselves that we've pushed away or refused to look at. It's the collection of traits, impulses, and potentials that we were taught were unacceptable or that we just never developed. It's basically everything that's hiding in our mental blind spots. Let's make this really concrete. Let's say you're somebody who prides yourself on being logical, rational, and objective. You make your decisions based on facts and data. In personality terms, you might be what we call a thinker. So what happens to the part of you that's all about emotion and connection? Does it just go away? Nope. If you over-rely on your logical side, your emotional feeling function gets shoved down into the basement of your personality, into your shadow. And down there, because it's ignored and undeveloped, it doesn't mature. It stays primitive. And then it can burst out like a monster in moments of stress, leading to these irrational, emotional outbursts that seem to come from nowhere and leave you totally baffled. And this whole idea leads us directly to a tool that a lot of you have probably heard of, the Myers-Briggs, or MBTI. But let's talk about the way Jung's ideas were meant to be used. Not as a simple label, but as a roadmap for personal growth. I love this observation from the source material because it's so true. We see it everywhere now, right? People wear their personality type like a badge of honor. You see the coffee mug that says INTJ on it, which is basically code for, please don't talk to me. Or a t-shirt that just says I for introvert, which kind of feels like a do not disturb sign at a hotel. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it, when we use these types as a simple label, are we just giving ourselves a convenient excuse? You know, oh, sorry I was blunt, I'm an INTJ. Or I can't go to the party, I'm an introvert. When we do that, it stops being a tool for growth and becomes a shield we use to stay exactly where we are. See, Jung's whole point was never about putting you in a box. It was about giving you a map to get out of the box you're already in. The real idea is to first understand your natural strengths, your dominant functions. But then, and this is the most important part, you have to turn around and look at the opposite, your weakest function, the one that's living in your shadow. The real goal is to then consciously work on developing that weaker side so you can become a more balanced, more whole human being. So, what does this process of becoming whole actually look like in the real world? It's all about bringing those hidden parts of yourself into the light and freeing yourself from the unconscious patterns that run your life. Jung had a special name for this lifelong journey: individuation. It's the process of becoming truly, authentically yourself. Not who your boss wants you to be, not who society tells you to be, but the unique individual you were always meant to become. It's like you're taking back the puppet strings from all those unconscious patterns and archetypes that have been pulling you around. Let's look at a fantastic real-world example from one of our sources. Sherry realized she was living her life completely trapped in the hero archetype. She was always the one jumping in to save the day, fixing everyone's problems, doing things nobody even asked her to do, and the result? She was constantly burned out, exhausted, and secretly resentful that nobody ever seemed to appreciate all her sacrifices. She was living out the hero's script, but she was also getting all the downsides that come with it: loneliness and feeling completely taken for granted. Or take this story from Dr. Deng. A producer tells her she should dye her gray hair because, quote, no one wants to be reminded of aging. Ouch. Now, the old Dr. Deng would have had two options. Either she complies and quietly resents it, or she rebels and causes a huge fight. But because she'd done this inner work, she was able to find a third way. She could acknowledge the producer's anxiety without making it her problem, and she was able to negotiate a middle path with grace and humor. And what happened next was incredible. By letting go of that perfect, invulnerable hero persona, by allowing her colleagues to see her boundaries and her imperfections, something totally new started to happen. People started to take care of her. She had this huge realization that her old pattern of never showing any weakness was the very thing that was blocking her from getting the support and connection she actually needed. So what's the big picture here? Well, first, that feeling of emptiness isn't something to run from. It's a signpost, a call to adventure from your inner self. That journey requires you to face your shadow, because that's where your greatest potential for growth is hidden. Tools like MBTI can be a great flashlight for the first few steps, but they're not the destination. Real, lasting growth, what Jung called individuation, is about integrating all the parts of who you are, the good and the bad, to become the complete person you were always meant to be. So I'll leave you with this final thought. For Jung, dreams were a direct hotline to your unconscious. And unlike Freud, he didn't think dreams were trying to hide things from you in some complicated code. He believed your unconscious is desperately trying to show you something, shouting to get your attention in the only language it knows, the language of symbols. So maybe tonight, before you fall asleep, just ask yourself, what is my unconscious trying to tell me? The answer just might be the first step on your own path to finding meaning.